of the Meek, where we watch made-for-TV movies and miniseries so you don't have to. From Gia to Xenon, Hysteria to Sybil, welcome to Movies of the Meek.
Toothless is the 1997 ABC made-for-TV movie starring Kirstie Alley as a dentist who is killed in a car/bicycle accident and is then sent to limbo, where she chooses to become the Tooth Fairy to serve out her community service in limbo so that she can go to heaven. It was very good. And involved a lot of green screen.
A lot of green screen.
Some of the best green screen work I've seen all year.
Now, right off the bat, okay, so they have to establish the type of character that she is. You know, she's this nerdy girl that's just really into dentistry. She's a nerd for dentistry. And they also have to establish her tragic backstory, which is that her father was dead. You know, she was raised in a one-parent home. And she says, and I quote, "Did Daddy know he died today?"
Yeah, what was that? Was that the anniversary of...
So that was the 1-year anniversary of her father's death. And on the anniversary, she asked her mother, "Did Daddy know he died today?" To which the mother responds that, yeah, he does.
Very traumatic childhood for this.
And he loves them very much. Now, this is, of course, you establish that she's a working lady. She likes to work. You also, and one of the things that I thought was interesting right off the bat is they kind of show that she's really, really into her work, but she kind of doesn't understand people's problems with dentistry. It's like she has some sort of disconnect to people's fears, and she thinks she's doing a really good job, but people are in physical pain.
Yeah, the first guy we meet is like crying.
And people are horrified of her, and she's like, "Okay, have a nice day." And her friend is just like, like, you never get laid, you never do anything, you just sit around and watch your VHS tapes, and it's this cliche 90s, like, her life is a mess because she doesn't have a man, which is, I hate that trope within movies, but
I thought you were going to say one of my favorite tropes.
It's one of my favorite tropes in movies. But once again, it's just this idea that, she needs a man to fix her life. And so that's where you basically get into the incident that sets all of this in motion, which is she steps out on the street and she says that a bicycle messenger knocked her into the street.
She was in the middle of the street when the whole thing happened.
But the thing is that when you watch the way it's cut together, it's just flashing back and forth between like three different
one of the
things.
weakest death scenes I've ever seen.
It's her standing in the middle of the street. She hears the bicyclist going like, "Whoa," about to knock into her. And then they also cut to a car, which I assume was decided on in post, because the car is not actually visible in any shots ever. They never show her near a car in any way. They never show her hit by a car in any way. And so it's just like this disjointed body of a car moving in a direction. And so these three things are just like intercut, and then she ends up in limbo,
which is just a trailer park in the desert.
Which is just a trailer park in the desert. And that's where they establish the two things that conflict with each other, which is they say that she's in limbo for two different reasons. They say, one, that she's in limbo because, she lived a good life. She did all these things. Like, people loved her. She was a great person. She tried her best. She was great. But at the same time, she never loved anyone, and that's why she ended up in limbo. She wasted her life by not loving. And then the other thing that they say is because of the fact that she decided to go into dentistry, which the guy that is helping her in figure out her path said, with the choices that you were given in life, you, quote, decided to inflict pain on countless people. And so that's like a huge diss to dentists, because it's like, that's not the intention of a dentist. Like, other than the dentist in Little Shop of Horrors, like, dentists aren't fucking sadists. Like, they're literally just people that are trying to clean people's mouths. It just so happens that people are shitty and don't clean their mouths enough to, like, have pain inflicted on them.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the first description that they tell. That's like, this is why you're in limbo, is because you're fucking, your whole profession causes pain. And she's like, okay, all right, sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
Not even, mentioning the fact that her father was also a dentist. And her whole lineage are dentists.
Yeah.
They established that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So her whole family has just been spending centuries causing pain to people.
Yeah.
And not going to heaven. But we find out that it's really about her not loving people.
Yeah, and so, the time fits the crime, and so there's a whole book of different jobs that you can get because of the fact that you're a dentist that's in limbo. And going through the book and just thumbing through the different stuff, she chooses the job of bicuspid retriever, which she assumes is a quite simple job, which of course she then quickly finds out is the tooth fairy. And they put her in the tooth fairy costume pretty quickly, and it is very sexual. Like, her boobs are hanging out constantly when she's talking to children, and it is very strange. She's rolling around on these kids' beds, just like dumping them out. I don't know. It rubbed me a weird way.
It did.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know. And so she goes through fucking training to become a tooth fairy
with Raul.
With Raul. And that is when I noticed for the first time the handy cam.
You noticed it there.
That's where
you didn't notice
it
immediately, like when she first got to Limbo, when like every shot was like a low angle following her and her instructor around the trailer park.
No, I noticed it. In training. And so the one thing that I thought was interesting is the technique that you use to fly is actually the same technique that people use to fly when they dream. If you notice that, which is the concept of you reaching your hands up into the air, and then when you push down, that raises you upwards. That is actually like a pretty standard way that people, when they're dreaming, they describe the ability to fly and the method in which they fly. So that was kind of like a neat little thing. I guess if you know about that. If not, it's just fucking dumb.
I didn't, and I read it as fucking dumb.
But to me, I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, they have to show her crash because it's hilarious. And they establish that, since she's in limbo, she has to be brought to this like gray, depressing looking room. And they show her this typewriter that's just typing out names of children.
Typing.
And then there's a television, which they establish the television shows when children lose their teeth, which I think is an important thing to remember, because she uses it for every other reason but that throughout the movie.
She uses it on her downtime to spy on children.
Yes.
And her like friends and loved ones in her own life.
Yeah.
I thought was very creepy.
Yeah.
And I mean, just that she's like, so she can only be a tooth fairy obviously at night. So for the other part of the day, she's just sitting in this room watching children at school.
She also goes against that later on when there's the one girl that Bobby wants to have sex with, and so there's the girl that Bobby wants.
He wants to walk her home. Like he's 10.
We all know what holding hands means,
Yep,
right?
Yep.
So he wants to have sex with this girl, and then Catherine decides that she wants to help this girl with her biology test so that she can go to this field trip, and so she ends up, when the girl passes the test and she gets that scholarship, it's during the day, and she shows up in the middle of the day to congratulate her, and all of the kids see the Tooth Fairy. All of them, once again, during the day. Not during the night.
Yeah, she
it's
breaks
in the middle of the day.
Yeah, I think it's after that she just kind of shows up whenever she wants to, which is when everything goes to shit.
Yeah.
She essentially turns the whole school into a cult.
Yeah.
For the Tooth Fairy.
So once again, she's in this dumb room, and she gets a list, and that's when they establish the concept of time travel within this film, which is that depending on how long the list is, time will slow down or speed up to accommodate your ability to get all these teeth in one night. And that is when we are introduced to our first flying scene, because she obviously has to fly to all these different houses. Now, describe the flying sequences to me, because they do take up 40% of this movie.
Just imagine just aerial footage of various cities throughout the world, and then a translucent Kirstie Alley in a Cinderella-like dress, kind of floating around and acting like a jackass. These scenes are usually accompanied by music. The Beach Boys had a song in this movie. I loved it. Yeah, it's usually just her floating around, but there's a couple times where she interacts with things.
Yeah.
Like one time when she flies into a plane, and her CG body starts spinning around the frame. There was little to no effort put into this part of the movie.
It was one of the cheapest looking things I've ever seen.
I think they use the same footage of her in the training scene, because that's also CG when she's flying in.
Yeah.
Well, that was part wire work, and then there's another part where it's clearly her CG floating around in that room. I think they use that same footage for this.
And it's one of those...
It looked terrible.
It's one of those things where it's they never tried to even change perspective. They never picked more than one angle of her. It's always her facing the camera dead on and just looking around ooh.
But it happens so many times. It happens five times.
5 times in the movie.
I will
and they're
say,
not short.
No, but they do get shorter throughout the movie. But the first one is legit a couple minutes, 2 to 3 minutes of a full Beach Boys song playing. And it's fucking crazy.
And that's the thing, is that it's showing her quote unquote traveling throughout the world.
But why does she need to travel throughout the why is she physically traveling? She can teleport anywhere.
But that also raises the thing where it's clearly the only thing that she cares about are these kids that just so happen to be in the town that she lived in. She's the Tooth Fairy traveling all around the world taking all these teeth. She's apparently the only Tooth Fairy, and she's going around doing this, and yet the only things that she cares about is the story Bobby is dealing with, which is the problems that he has with his dad now that their mom is dead, and it just so happens that Bobby lives in her neighborhood. And so it's such a closed in story for a person that is not only in a fucking metaphysical plane of existence, but then on top of that is able to alter time and go throughout the greater planet. fucking insane. Now she goes to Bobby's house, and this is our introduction to our kind of secondary character. And now one of the rules that they establish is that you're not supposed to make anyone aware of your presence, and you're not supposed to really influence these people's lives in any way, which of course she fucking just doesn't obey those rules at all. And when she appears, Bobby's like, what are you doing here? And she, doesn't want to be like a creeper. And so she's like, I'm the Tooth Fairy. Why do you think I'm wearing this? And Bobby says, I don't know. You're an idiot. Which I loved. And then that's when they basically establish the dad can't see her, but Bobby can, and they establish the idea that once you lose all your baby teeth, that's when you lose your ability to believe in the unbelievable, which is they say that's your loss of innocence.
Does that apply to all beings like the Tooth Fairy, like Santa Claus and Easter Bunny? Like once you lose your baby teeth, you can't see Santa Claus or Easter Bunny or the boogeyman, because that's a thing in this movie too. At a certain point in Limbo,
they had that sign.
Catherine walked past this sign for like different beings, like different jobs that people could take, and one's a boogeyman. And I was like, what is what the fuck is that? Why would you need to scare people to go to heaven?
Ooh, that's a really good point. I have no idea why.
But whatever.
But then that's also, looking up the oldest person to still have their baby teeth. There is a person that has the Guinness record of having baby teeth till 87 years of age. And so hypothetically, if that person lived in this film's universe, then that is an 87-year-old person that still has never lost their innocence, and so is still able to see the Tooth Fairy, the Boogeyman, Santa Claus, Cupid exists.
Father Time. I don't know what that means. Like, what is Father Time's role? What did they do?
They give Chrissy Alley the ability to deliver teeth. Now, this movie is really kind of just a reason for Chrissy Alley to ham it up. They kind of just want to let her go and display her acting chops, because there's one sequence, speaking of the different roles that you can get, and that's an interesting thing to understand about this universe, is the fact that the people that are fulfilling these roles that we always consider were some positive entity like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny is actually a person that's not good enough to get into heaven. They're just doing it as community service for us commoners. And so the Easter Bunny gets interrogated by Christy Alley, and she puts on like this detective noir voice because she fucking doesn't want him giving out candy, and she's like, so you think that you're doing a good thing by giving him these chocolate eggs? Well, I'll tell you, buddy, you're gonna get it. It's just like, Jesus, fucking calm down.
Was this after the Limbo line?
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite parts of the movie. They have a Limbo line in Limbo.
Now they continue with obviously her flying around and getting more and more and more teeth.
She
and it is basically the fact that Bobby is having difficulty dealing with the fact that this woman is real, that he desires to see her more and more, and the second time that he sees her is by accident. Bobby is a bully, and he gets fucking rocked in the face.
Knocks his tooth out.
And they knock his tooth out, so that's his second tooth. And when she shows up the second time, he says that you're a figment of my imagination. And she's like, I'll prove that I'm not. And she gives herself a dinosaur head. And she roars at him, and he's like, yeah, by the way, that doesn't make me think you're not a figment of my imagination. And she's like, fuck. And then that's when, for some reason, he decides to talk to her about how he's having girl trouble, and she gives him advice on how to deal with girls, and he implements it the next day.
Yeah.
She literally is like, things that are worth it in life are worth you pushing past your comfort zone and just going and seizing what you want. What you want is never going to be easy to get, but you have to go out and get it. And so he sees, the girl he wants to have sex with, and he's just like, no, I can't talk to her. And then he's like, you know what? I got to do it. And so he goes and talks to her, and he's like, oh, can I walk you home? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, cool, let's go. And she's like, it's only fourth period. And he's like, okay. And yeah, I was just shocked how quickly this movie moved into him implementing that advice. And as soon as he realizes that this advice is good, then basically everyone starts doing it. Everyone starts seeking out her advice. And it's one of those things where it's like, is she a genius? Because she's helping all these people with things that it doesn't make sense that she's able to help them out with. And it's kind of insane.
Also, this isn't really everything she's doing is not getting her closer to her goal of learning to love people.
No. And that's also,
at least not directly.
Story structure wise, this movie doesn't have a three-part structure, because normally in your second half, that's where you have your lowest point for your main character, and then at that lowest point, they really push hard against it, and they get what they've always needed to do. It's after they've lost everything that they can finally find the power within themselves to give it their all. Never happens. It blew my mind. We're 70 minutes in, and I was just like, she's just coasting through this.
Yeah, she just keeps flying.
Yeah.
she just causes chaos at this elementary school. That's all that happens, really. All of Bobby's friends start believing, and then there's a huge epidemic of children knocking their own teeth out so they can see her.
Yeah.
And that so she can help them with all their issues.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah. And
she loves it.
She
she loves it.
And so yeah, all these kids are trying to see the Tooth Fairy. And it just raised so many questions, because like I was saying with the TV, she sees Bobby on the TV, but it was at a time where he wasn't losing a tooth. He wasn't about to lose a tooth. She was just watching him on the TV. Another thing is she sleeps at one point. We see her asleep. Why does she need to sleep? She shouldn't. She's the Tooth Fairy. She's dead. She's a dead person.
She's a dead person.
She shouldn't need to sleep. It's not her mind isn't gonna atrophy in any way, because
she has no body.
Yeah. It makes no sense. It's fine. And then the dad, so it's the dad from Pet Semetery. Okay.
Yeah.
And he is a terrible actor. Okay.
Yeah, he's pretty bad.
Now, I will say, I think the reason he got so many roles in this era is because his voice is really smooth sounding, and it kind of sounds like it's just ADR'd all the time. It sounds pure. It's not acted out well, but it's just a nice sounding voice. It just naturally doesn't sound like a person ever said it. It sounds like it was made by a computer to soothe you. And he is terrible at acting. And so he's not getting concerned enough by the fact that his kid's obsessed with the Tooth Fairy, and I would think that would become a huge point of contention, where he's like, my son is becoming a schizophrenic that is creating a motherly archetype to replace his dead mother.
Yeah, he catches his son talking to nobody.
To no one.
Yeah.
And he's just
he's kind of fine with it.
He's like, I'll talk to him tomorrow. And he's just like, no, you should be scared.
A horrible dad in this movie.
Yeah, terrible. And then at the end, I will say, once again, it's a weird thing to think about, because in the narrative in the movie, it makes sense that he'd be like, I stand by my son. He's a good kid, and yeah, I believe in the Tooth Fairy too, but it's, if you think about health-wise in the real world, that's a bad thing. And then, yeah, so
he just says he believes in the Tooth Fairy to comfort his son, to stick up. He doesn't ever see the Tooth Fairy in this movie or know that she exists.
So he sees it at the very end.
At the end, but he doesn't know that she's, or was, the Tooth Fairy.
That's when he sees her the second time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
Okay. So bad parenting.
Yeah, just bad parenting. But yeah, and so basically it becomes this tooth pulling epidemic where all these kids are just ripping their teeth out, and they show this by doing the cliche spinning newspaper that stops, and they zoom in, and it goes, children toothless, school toothless, and it's just terribly cheesy.
Is that where they get the title of the movie?
Oh.
That's kind of horrifying that that's where they got the fucking title of this movie.
But it's from this that basically they come to the conclusion that they should kick Bobby out of the school. They're like, we gotta get rid of Bobby because Bobby's the root of all of this. All these kids are getting their teeth ripped out to get parental advice. Yeah. And so it's when they're having this confrontation with him that, once again, she shows up in the middle of the goddamn day to just go, hey, everything's fine, guys. Hey, I love you, Bobby. And that's when she appears in front of everyone, and the dad is like, hey, what's up with the prom queen? And everyone's like, what's going on? And then the limbo police show up. They're like, you fucked up real bad, Tooth Fairy. Time to go to hell. And it's because she finally learned to love little Bobby that when she goes in the elevator, that she ends up just going back to the time when she was hit by a bicycle / maybe a car.
Yeah, it does a reset.
Yeah. Oh my god. She ends up running into Bobby. She is his new dentist, and Bobby remembers her and is like, Tooth Fairy, what are you doing here?
Still has all the memories.
He has all the memories.
From a timeline that never existed.
Yeah, from a timeline that never existed. Unless, of course, that timeline existed before she got hit.
There would be a Tooth Fairy being of her floating around and her physical human form.
At the same time. Which would be incredible.
Which doesn't make any sense because she was watching people move her shit out of her house.
Oh, yeah.
So that is a plot hole.
Yeah, that's a huge plot hole.
That is a goof and trivia.
Because yeah, when that happened, I was like, whoa.
I have a question, and maybe you can help me with this.
Oh, yeah.
At one point in the movie, she's in limbo, and she sees her old dentist that we see early in the movie.
Yes.
And he says that after she tells him that she's the Tooth Fairy, she says, oh, I heard Tooth Fairies never go to heaven.
Yeah.
And I was wondering why he says that. Why is it implied that every Tooth Fairy just goes out and causes mayhem all over the fucking world with solving people's problems? Or is it because the job itself, if they're a good Tooth Fairy, that means they're making money for the tooth bank, which would mean they don't want them to go to heaven because they wouldn't be making as much money. I know it's a stupid little thing, but I was confused as to why he said, why Tooth Fairies never get to go to heaven.
Yeah, I've no idea.
I don't fucking know, but I kept thinking about it. I was like, what the fuck?
And that was even
and during the trial, they were like, you made the most tooth money out of any Tooth Fairy ever.
And that's, Raoul, even brings up.
What's his deal, by the way? Because he's the saddest character in the whole movie.
But he even brings up the fact that, you know, she comes to the realization, and she even tells him, she goes, I wasn't put into this job because I was a dentist, was I? That was just a crock of shit. And he's just like, is that what they told you? And she's like, that's what they told me. And he was like, yeah, it's not because you were a dentist. And it's like, okay, so like, what is this job then? Who's it reserved for? You know? It makes no sense. And yeah, especially, and so that's the thing, is that did they pick that job for her because historically, like the tooth fairy job is a job that's destined to fail? Is that why? Or yeah, I mean, you're right. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is that the jobs are they're put in positions where the position itself is a test for them to prove, like, or to fix whatever they fucked up in their life and maybe have the chance to start over.
Yeah.
But what was his deal? Because he said that he left behind his family, and he implied that it was his fault that he died. I was thinking it was a drug overdose or something, which is why, because he said it like he left behind all of his loved ones and they didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
But what is his, like?
Did he kill himself?
Maybe. But like, that's really dark.
Yeah, that's dark as fuck.
Then we see him at the end of the movie after she gets to start her life over again.
Yeah.
We see a couple of the people from Limbo, like, doing the wink, wink, nod, nod at her, saying, you know, don't fuck up again.
Yeah.
And he's one of the guys. He's like, this is your last chance.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck here like me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a dark character for sure.
Yeah, and that's also the ending. The ending monologue of the movie is also kind of dark, because she's like, you know what? You gotta let love in, otherwise you may as well be dead. And then the movie's over, and you're just like, oh, okay.
But she retains all of her memories of being a dead person, Tooth Fairy.
Yeah.
That is also horrifying.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, if you're a good person and you love people and you do all the things and you die, then you go straight to heaven. You go to limbo first, or you just go straight to heaven?
You just go straight to heaven. You'd be set.
Okay.
How about some trivia?
Yeah, give me some trivia.
This is the first Disney Channel movie to be rated PG and to have foul language.
Foul language?
I don't remember any. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The scenes with Catherine is flying all over the world to retrieve missing baby teeth were shot on a green screen. Shocker. Christy Alley was hung by safety harness and wires to make it look like she could fly. Sure. The wires were edited out so it seemed like Christy Alley knew how to fly. Sure. Cindy Ruth Thomas then did the scenes where Catherine landed so that Christy Alley wouldn't get hurt. Sure. After this, Christy Alley would say her lines.
What?
That's way too much.
That's too much. Also, so she looked like she knew that she could fly. Like, so you mean dancing in front of a green screen?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Next week, we will be watching and reviewing Pee-wee's Christmas special, which is available in its entirety on YouTube and is the greatest thing that has ever happened to Christmas. In John B's, Mecca Lecca Hi, Mecca Hiney Ho, everyone.